Hey guys, Sandra here from Carcraft Auto Detailing in Melbourne. What you're seeing here is the time-lapse footage of a detailing clinic where today's car, the Audi A6, was washed and decontaminated in preparation for the paint correction stage. I do apologise for the shaky time-lapse footage, but if you can bear through the first minutes of this video, the footage will be back to normal once the car is pulled inside. So I'll start by filling you in on what this particular detailing clinic was about, and what was done to the car during the wash and decontamination stages. Firstly, this was a half-day introduction to detailing clinic where the whole teaching curriculum was based around introducing the students to the very basic techniques, methods and products associated with car detailing at its core. The main emphasis was on surface preparation in relation to safe and effective car washing and chemical and mechanical decontamination practices, trying to get the class comfortable and involved with these basic principles to build up their knowledge and confidence in these areas, as well as do my best to answer any questions or concerns they may have along the way. There's just so much information out there today and so many options to consider in every aspect of detailing that sometimes makes even the most basic areas or methods a confusing or misleading scenario. So perhaps more than anything else, these clinics allow the participants to see and experience the results firsthand, and perhaps gives them a more clear understanding of what's really proven, relevant and important from a professional's point of view, as opposed to much of the misinformation and myths that's circulating and perhaps coming from less reputable sources. In regards to what the Audi A6 received in relation to the wash and decontamination stages, if you've seen my videos on the Audi S3 or Mazda 6, it was a very similar process using much of the same products and methods. But just to briefly go through the stages, we started with the wheels, giving them a pre-soak with Auto FINESSE VERSO APC and CONCOURS PURGE wheel cleaner, followed by a pressure rinse down and a re-application of the products using some wheel brushes and mitts to give the wheels a thorough clean. The car was then covered in a blanket of Snow Plus wash detergent, left to dwell and then pressure rinse down. This was followed by a hand wash using the 2-bucket method and another pressure rinse down. Both the chemical and mechanical decontamination stages were completed using CONCOURS Purify with the clay mitts, and a final pressure rinse down and pat down dry using the Tempest microfiber high-tech drying towel. The Audi A6 was then pulled inside and compressed air was used to blow out the remaining water, and a final IPA wipe down of the entire vehicle was performed as the final preparation stage for correction. So onto the pre-correction inspection stage. Now overall, this Audi is in pretty good condition considering it's a 6-year-old daily driver. However, under the inspection lights, I can see quite a lot of water spots and etchings, which seems to be the main defect affecting this paint. But apart from those etchings, the paint is also displaying some scattered, random, isolated deeper scratches, together with consistent light swirl marks and a loss of clarity and increased haze, which seems to be due to a light uniform layer of oxidation. Now, as you may have guessed, this is yet another product testing detail that will be largely focused on gathering information that's based on testing detailing products and techniques with a main emphasis on paint correction. So I will be doing some further testing with quite a few compounds and pads, and I'm also going to be using the RUPES Mark II 15mm throw polisher today instead of my Shy Mate, to also compare machines and results, and to test these products with what's considered to be the industry standard of dual action polishers today. For this first stage of testing, I'm also going to be using the Lake Country Blue H2O foam pad with all the 8 compounds I've selected for this test on this Audi's grey paint, and using the same polisher and technique to give me some more consistent results where the only real variable will be the actual compound. I'll be talking you through the user experience and results of each compound as I go, and just giving you my overall experience with them so far, but I'll be showing the results on the paint once I've completed all 8 sections with each of the 8 compounds. So first up is Precision Compound by CONCOURS. Precision really is becoming my benchmark compound, especially with the blue HDO foam pad, that's just consistently delivering fantastic results. As far as user experience goes, it really sits somewhere in the middle with decent lubrication and perhaps some light dusting, but quite easily to spread the product into your section, and the wipe off is yet again neither great or bad. Out of all the compounds here, Precision has quite clearly the best finish with the most clarity, and it would be the only compound here I consider using for a single stage polish on this particular paint. But although the finish is near perfect, I can still see a touch of haze where the paint will benefit from a lighter follow-up second stage. As far as defect removal goes, it would be in the top 3, showing better results than most, but not the most cut compared to a couple of other compounds here. Next is a prototype compound, not yet to market, that I've been testing quite a lot, and honestly I'm just struggling to understand how to extract its claimed great performance. Now, I've pretty much used the entire sample I had, and also tested it with many pads, machines, and various paint types, but I had to accept that it just plain and simple doesn't work for me. From a user experience point of view, it really is at times a nightmare to use with excessive dusting, product sling, and what feels like hugely inadequate lubrication that I honestly haven't been able to address or rectify, and the wipe off has also been quite a struggle in most cases. It has, however, at times seemed to deliver in its cutting ability, though not in this instance, and as far as finish goes, it's hands down the worst one here by far. Next in line is Clear Cut by CARPRO. I have to say that the more and more I've used this compound, the greater appreciation I'm having for it, and the more surprised at its capabilities I've been. Now, I wouldn't say the user experience is the best, as it will slightly dust, but I definitely wouldn't say it's a bad user experience at all. In truth, you do need to adjust your technique a little with this compound, but if you do, it really is an exceptional product that does provide speedy results and a great user-friendly experience. On the cutting side of things, it really is the front runner here, addressing the water etchings and oxidation with ease. And as far as the finish goes, it's also in the top half, but not quite to the level of Precision. The fourth compound I tried was the Last Cut Compounding Glaze by The Last Detail. Now, it may not be a surprise to many that I really love this compound and have been using it perhaps a little more than any other compound I own, which is strongly due to just how well it performs on microfiber pads and most paint types. Out of the compounds I've tried so far, this is easily the most user-friendly of the bunch, with really no dusting, increased lubrication, a very easy wipe off, and really nothing to complain about whatsoever from a user experience point of view. I'd say its cut and leveling ability on this paint is just one step behind Clear Cut, but its finish is, however, a step up. Fifth in line is 501 Cutting Compound by 3D. I have to say that at times I've gotten great results with this compound, but other times it really hasn't worked. I'm not at the stage of passing judgment on this compound as yet, because I feel I need a little more time with it to really work out if I can extract more consistency out of its results. But as far as the user experience goes, it's another middle of the range compound that actually provides a great even spread over the section, but can dust a bit and sometimes be slightly hard to wipe off. The cut and defect removal isn't the best one here, but it's actually quite good compared to most. The finish, however, is where it's really fallen short on this paint, with very noticeable haze and micro marring. Next up is Vision Compound by Detailing Kingdom. Now, hands down, this compound does provide the most pleasurable user experience of all the products I'm using here. It's just got such a fantastic consistency that allows the product to spread and lubricate the surface like no other. And in addition, the wipe off is just a pleasure with no dust to be seen. Now, just like 3D's 501, I haven't completely made up my mind on this compound, as although I do love using it, I am struggling a little at getting and seeing the great results. So I will be continuing to test it and see if I can tweak my technique or pad selection to extract the results I'm hoping it can deliver. Now in relation to cut on this particular paint, it hasn't really done all that well compared to the others, but the finish is a little better, sitting about mid-range. Number 7 is JESCAR Correction Compound. Now the only real reason I'm trying this compound is basically because so many subscribers have told me that I have to. It's not available here locally, so it's hard to get a hold of and very pricey to ship. But the viewers have spoken, so I try to listen. For those of you that don't know, JESCAR is a compound developed by MENZERNA, which is widely available here locally, but JESCAR is a different formulation developed for the American market. Now I did play around with it a little before this test, but still nowhere near as much as any of the other compounds here. What I found is quite a nice user experience with minimal dusting, good lubrication and a fairly nice wipe off. So really nothing to complain from a user point of view, at least not so far. As far as cut goes, it does however sit in the lower end compared to the other compounds here, but the finish on this paint was actually one of the better ones, perhaps just a step behind Precision and the last cut. Last in this lineup is MENZERNA Fast Gloss 300. Now this is yet another compound that isn't available locally here, although MENZERNA's other compounds, which I've used for many years and really like, are. It's also another compound that I've been told on several occasions that I just needed to try, so I did and have been testing it over the last few months. I'll be honest in saying that compared to MENZERNA FG 400, which is a compound I've used a lot, I just haven't had the same success with FG 300, mostly due to the poor finish I constantly seem to have with it time and time again. From a user-friendly point of view, it's also not the greatest, with noticeable dusting and not the easiest wipe off either, but honestly it's not all that bad, just not as good as most of the others. There's no doubting that it does a fairly good job at cutting or leveling the paint consistently, as it did on this Audi paint, but the finish was by far the worst one here, excluding the prototype compound with excessive haze and marring that really would be quite a bit of work to refine in the second stage. So looking at all the sections and directly comparing results, there's just no doubting that Precision has by far the best balance of cut and finish with the Lake Country Blue HDO foam pad on this particular paint type. Now I also want to discuss the difference with the RUPES polisher compared to the ShineMate. Overall what I found is that the RUPES out of the box is just a little frustrating for me to use. But after doing the washer modification, it really becomes a great machine. Now overall, I'd say it's smoother than the ShineMate and does cut a little quicker as well, but just doesn't seem to finish as well or cleanly in general, at least compared to the 12mm throw ShineMate I mostly use. Now RUPES does make the 12mm Duetto as well, but it's really not great at defect removal like the same 12mm ShineMate polisher, as they're just very different machines. Some of you will know that I own several polishers from RUPES, Flex, ShineMate and a few other brands, but more so than the brand is the actual polisher itself that I like. So I think all these brands make some fantastic polishers and some not so fantastic polishers in my opinion. So I'm not so much brand loyal, but more interested in the specific machines or models they make. Just going from the ShineMate to the RUPES, I did have to adjust my technique, but quite honestly they are equally capable, and it's really more about getting to know your polisher and becoming familiar with it to get the best performance out of it regardless of make or model. This also extends to the compounds I'm using. Now each and every one of these compounds does seem to work great from what I've heard and read about them. So even though I may be personally having greater success with some compared to others, it doesn't necessarily mean that some are great and the others are bad. It just means that with my style of working, conditions and techniques, some are just better suited to me and address my needs better than others. So all I'm trying to do here is just share those experiences with you guys, but I encourage you to stick with what works best in your world regardless of whether it's a compound, pad or polisher. So on to some more testing. I managed to get a hold of some of the newer RUPES wool pads, and I really wanted to give them a go with a couple of the compounds here that I had better results with on this paint. So first up was Precision with the medium RUPES wool pad. Now one thing I immediately noticed is just how well these pads keep their rotation with minimal friction, and they seem fantastic around curves. I did notice a touch more dusting and sling compared to the foam pads, but really nothing all that bad. The wipe off, however, was a bit of work, which might have been due to the compound not breaking up completely, and perhaps needing a little more time with these somewhat gentle wool pads. For a wool pad, the finish was actually quite good, but not to the clarity level of the previous foam pad. For a comparison, I tried the same wool pad with the Last Cut compounding glaze. I have to say that the lubrication and lack of friction was pretty insane, as the pad just effortlessly glided over the paint with a real nice user experience. But once again, the wipe off was a little harder than it should be, considering how easy the Last Cut usually wipes off. Overall, the finish was a step up compared to using this pad with precision, but still not quite as good as the foam. And where the wool pad seemed to have much better correction around the curves, the foam still seemed to have better leveling ability on the flat panel sections. Out of curiosity, I wanted to compare this with a microfiber pad to see what the differences in finish and cut would be on this paint type, both with the Last Cut and then clear cut. Now straight away I could feel a massive difference with how the wool just glides over the paint compared to the microfiber that really seems to grip the paint more aggressively. In relation to finish, it was actually quite close between the wool and the microfiber pads, but the greatest difference was the leveling ability of the microfiber, which did eliminate all the defects and provide an increased clarity compared to the wool. Overall, the cutting and leveling with the microfiber was great with both the Last Cut and clear cut, but the finish with the Last Cut was quite obviously better and will be much quicker to refine in the second stage. So at this stage, using the Last Cut with the Lake Country fiber cutting pads is going to provide the best balance of cutting and leveling ability, as well as finish in the first stage, but it will need a quick second stage to address some minor haze. Now before I get to starting and moving on with this combination, there was one final compound I wanted to try, which is the new RUPES MILLE coarse compound. This was actually the first time trying it, and I thought I'd take you through how I test and what I look for when first trying a new compound. Also, this compound has been formulated to work with a forced rotation machine rather than a free spinning DA, but I guarantee you it will be used on plenty of different machines, especially here in Australia, where detailers don't really stick to specific paint polishing systems in general. So to start with, I tried it with a microfiber pad and also worked a much larger section than I normally would in general. This is just a way for me to test some of the compound's characteristics in a more extreme way to find out where its limits are. Microfiber is a more demanding material to polish with, so if a compound works well with microfiber, it'll also usually work with foam or wool, but not necessarily the other way around. And working a larger section for a longer period will also test things like the compound's lubrication, heat generation, dusting, and ease of wipe off in more severe conditions. So I'm not so much looking for defect removal or clarity of finish in this first test, though I still will be assessing it, but I'm mostly trying to determine how this compound works, feels, and behaves under pressure, as if it does well here, it's a great indication that it will be a very versatile and user-friendly product in various environments and conditions. So I have to say that by most indications, it really performed amazingly here. The lubrication was really great, the heat was minimal, as was the dusting, and the wipe off was also quite good. A couple of things I did however notice was a bit of product sling, although nothing too crazy. But perhaps the biggest issue was removing the fine transparent film of product that seemed to bond to the paint. Now sometimes this can be seen as a filling agent, but I don't really believe it has fillers, just a little more finer residue that seems to require an extra wipe or two with your IPA product to remove. So next, I tried it in a more standard 2x2 foot area to get a better look at its cutting and finishing abilities. Now overall, this second section is really quite good in relation to both cut and finish, with great defect removal. And although not perfect, the finish is actually really quite good with just very minimal haze and micro marring. But once again, the initial wipe off is really great and easy, but the remaining film layer of product is a little more work to remove. And almost greasy and oily, and does take at least 2 IPA wipes to remove completely. So at this stage, apart from the initial wipe off, the compound seems to perform really well and deliver great results in this initial test. But I will hopefully continue to test it more thoroughly in the coming months. So after all the product, pad and machine testing, I proceeded to using the last cut compounding glaze with the Lake Country microfiber pad as my combination for the initial first defect leveling stage. Also, I just wanted to further explain why I'm using the microfiber pad with the last cut in this particular case. Firstly, whereas the foam cutting pad would have taken me about 2 to 3 sets of passes to remove the defects, microfiber is just taking 1 or 2 sets. The other thing is the surface leveling that microfiber with the last cut is producing. Now, there is some debate whether you can actually reduce orange peel without sanding, but regardless of that, I can without a doubt see an improvement of the orange peel with this combination that I wasn't seeing with the foam. And lastly, I have said it before that the last cut just simply works better with microfiber pads than any other compound here in my opinion and experience. Now for this second stage testing phase, I'm actually only using CONCOURS Finesse polish, but testing it with 6 different pads to explore its potential and behaviour on a variety of light cutting, polishing and finishing pads with this paint type. Overall, for those of you who aren't familiar with Finesse, it's a finishing polish, but with a little more cut than your standing polish in its initial abrasive form, which then breaks down and diminishes quite easily to super fine abrasives as you polish. So its range from cut to finish is actually quite large for a polish in this category. So if you were to place it on the scale, it would sit somewhere between a medium compound and a super fine polish. And I have found it to be a polish that is hugely pad dependent, meaning it can cut quite a bit with more aggressive pads, yet still finish down amazingly on a less aggressive finishing pad. My first test was with the ShiMate Red finishing foam pad. Overall, this is my favourite ShiMate pad as it simply allows most polishers to finish down flawlessly on many different paint types, which was the case here once again, producing perfect clarity with just 2 or 3 very quick passes with the machine and pad. Second was the RUPES new lighter wool pad. Now I can't say the finish was bad, but it really wasn't as good as the last section. Although for something like a one-step correction on a mid to hard paint, Finesse with this pad could actually be a great option. My third section was with the ShiMate Yellow cutting foam pad. Now believe it or not, I've actually had great success with this combination on harder paint types with light defects. But in this particular case, although the Audi paint is on the harder side, it's not overly rock hard like some other paints I've come across, as the pad is leaving a little too much haze in the finish. The next section was with the Lake Country Orange H2O polishing pad. Now so far, this is the next best section after the red ShiMate pad, and honestly the finish is extremely close in both sections, though I'm just seeing an ever so slightly better finish with the red pad. The fifth section was with the Lake Country Blue H2O foam pad. Again, it wasn't a bad finish, but really more middle of the range here, and actually a real viable option for a one-stage correction on this paint, as the defects aren't overly bad. The last section was with the SCHOLL Concepts Blue Spider pad. Now one thing I have noticed with the RUPES polisher is that it really doesn't seem to like the SCHOLL pads, and struggles in its rotation and smoothness, whereas the Shimei polisher seems to be fine with these pads. So I ended up having to increase the polisher to its top speed to just keep the pad rotating, but it still felt really awkward, and the results showed that with quite an average finish. Overall, as you can hopefully see, none of the finishes here are bad at all. It's just more the case that some are better than others. So I'd be really comfortable going forward here with either the red Shimei pad or the orange Lake Country pad, but I would still give a very slight edge to the red Shimei, so finesse with this pad will be my combination for the second stage. Now one last thing I wanted to show you guys is how I would proceed on this paint if I wasn't doing more time consuming multi-stage paint correction. The main thing for me when deciding if I'm going to be doing more basic single stage enhancement or light correction work versus more in-depth correction comes down to time, cost, and whether it's appropriate for the level of existing defects on the paint. So just for example, a pad like the Lake Country Purple Foam Wool together with finesse polish would be a great choice here as a quicker single stage process. Now although this pad and polish combination isn't going to address all the defects, it will still remove a good 80 to 90% of them in this case. And although the finish won't display 100% perfect clarity, it'll also be quite close to it. So it's really all about finding a good balance between cut and finish in a single stage of polishing. But besides that, as I've stated before, it's largely based on time. So whereas I'll usually spend anywhere from 3 to 5 days performing high-end correction work, I'll usually spend more like 1 to 2 days doing lighter correction or paint enhancement work. The other main difference is that I'll use my larger polisher a lot more than my mini or nano polishers, as once again I'm not chasing perfection and really just looking to give the paint a nice noticeable improvement. Now on this particular paint, a one stage would be an appropriate choice if the customer didn't want something closer to perfection, as the defects really aren't all that bad. But I have on many occasions been asked to do single stage polishing on cars with severely damaged paint, that quite honestly I've had to turn down because this process has its limitations. And for really bad paint, especially on harder paint types, it's just not going to produce the results that I'd be happy with or presenting my customer with. So with all the testing completed, as well as the bonnet and the boot all done, it was time to address the roof and windscreen glasses that were perhaps the worst affected areas in relation to the water spots and etchings. I'll also let you know that I did use a water spot remover before the final IPA alcohol-based wipe down on the roof and top panels, but it did very little to remove any of these etchings. So similar to how the bonnet was corrected, the roof and glass was also given a compounding using the last cut and microfiber pad to level down the defects. The only real difference would have been that the glass really doesn't benefit at all from a second stage of polishing due to its extremely hard surface that is easier to finish down without any marring or haze that paint suffers from. Hopefully you will be able to see that the difference was quite dramatic. And even more so, these water spots and etchings do need to be addressed as soon as possible, as if these mineral deposits are left on the paint, they will continue to further etch and eat their way into the clear coat, eventually resulting in clear coat failure. whole process was then repeated on each and every panel section, mostly using my mini polisher to address all the curves and finer edges, with the larger polisher treating the flat panel areas in both the primary cutting stage and the second finishing stages. Now towards the end of this detail, the blue RUPES coarse wool pads I'd ordered had finally arrived. So I decided to give them a go, as I was really keen to try them, and I have to say that my first impressions were very positive. I found the cut on these pads to be really great, and even more so, they seem to generate a lot less heat than the microfiber pads, and also be much better at maintaining rotation around curves, where the microfiber pads tend to store a lot more easily. Now although their cutting ability was great, it wasn't quite as good as the microfiber pads, but really not that much behind. The larger difference I noticed was the finish that was noticeably better and about as good as any coarse wool pad I've ever tried. The other thing I noticed about these pads is how easily and cleanly they blow out with compressed air compared to microfiber pads, and they seem to keep their performance longer than the microfiber that tends to gunk up much quicker. Now from the results and a user point of view, it's really hard to fault these pads, and I was absolutely loving them. But one thing that quite honestly upset me about these pads is that after using two of these 3-inch pads, on just 3 car panels, they both began to tear and start to deteriorate, whereas the microfiber pads I'm using have already been used to do several cars and are still just fine. Now I've said in past videos that I do love RUPES pads, as they generally are exceptional and perform really well, but I've had the same issue with every RUPES cutting pad, whether it be foam, microfiber or wool in this case, that they just seem to disintegrate before my very eyes and really have no durability whatsoever. And I'm really not lying when I say that I was genuinely upset, because I was thinking these pads could really be the way forward. But if I was to use these pads to do a whole car, it'd probably cost me close to $200 in just the pads, as they are by no means cheap. Now I haven't completely given up on them yet, and I do want to get a few more in the hope that I'll have better success, but for now I'll be sticking to the Lake Country microfiber pads. So with all the correction work finally complete, a final alcohol-based wipe down was done to prepare the paint for the Nova Evo glass coating that will be used as the paint protection product. In the last two videos I used Nova Pro, which is a certified only professional coating, whereas Nova Evo is available to the general public. Now just to give you a little information on Evo, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, and to explain the differences between Evo and Pro. Firstly, Evo is a little more user friendly to apply, so you will find the wipe down easier, and it also has a lot more latitude in its flash time. So it's much more forgiving and does give you a larger window of time, so you don't need to be 100% accurate with the wipe down or leveling stage. It's also just a single layer coating that has no real benefit in being layered, unlike Nova Pro. But don't think for a second that that's a bad thing, because Evo does go on quite thick due to its consistency and very low solvent content, which means it has extremely high active ingredients, unlike many coatings out there that are primarily solvents with minimal coating ingredients. So in most cases you will find that one layer of Evo is the equivalent of 2 to 3 layers of many other coatings out there. And you can certainly apply Evo over another coating like Nova Pro or even C-Quartz coatings if you wish, but it's just best not to apply a coating over Evo. Another difference with Evo is that it does need a full week to cure before you can apply a top coat or sealant over it. This is once again due to its high silica content and low carrier solvent base. The more solvents a coating has generally means that it will cure faster, but also apply much thinner as the carrier solvents evaporate. So its slower curing is actually a positive thing in this case. As far as gloss and water behaviour goes, it's really hard to distinguish between Evo and Pro as they are both equally impressive in that area. The main difference between the two is that Pro should last twice as long if it's layered and also be more chemical resistant. But once again, Evo is extremely durable and chemical resistant in comparison to just about any other coating out there. So hopefully that gives you an idea of just how extremely resistant and durable Nova Pro is. I really hope you guys enjoyed and found this video useful. I'll leave you with the final footage of this Audi A6, and I'll hopefully have an update video on it soon, showing you the water behaviour and look of the coating outdoors during a maintenance wash. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe to this channel to show your support for these videos, and I'll see you in the next one.
oh.